shortly. We've got some great speakers here today that will be sharing their knowledge and expertise on starting and nurturing a successful farm business. We have Pencke from Alluvial Farms, Allison, Trimble, and Blake from Coastal Realty, Marie Hegarty from Fair Cows Path Farm, and Elizabeth Hayes, Cloud Mountain Farm Center. So we'll just take a couple more seconds and then we're gonna kick it off here. Folks are coming in. I think you guys can sit. Yeah. Well, the screen is gonna end up happening.
Why don't we?
Yeah, there you go. And as long as it isn't in your eyeballs. Is it in your eyeballs?
No. There's enough room for you, Katie.
Come on up, Katie. Just pull off of that side. All right, thanks everyone for coming out to the 6th annual Whatcom Farm Expo. We're so pleased to see everybody's beautiful faces. It's been 2 years and we haven't been able to do this in person, so it's quite a pleasure. Brought to you by Whatcom Conservation District and Whatcom County Public Works. We're thrilled to have this day of networking and education. So the speakers have been great so far. We've already had 5 incredible speakers, and now we have our keynote panel. And to kick us off today, we're very pleased to have our executive Sadhu here from Whatcom County, who's going to kick off our panel with just a welcome and a thank you.
Thanks, everybody. All right, we are here talking about small farmers. Welcome to the panel. They're going to tell you all the stories about what they do and how they make a living with a small farmer. But I want to tell you a small story. I grew up in India, and in India, 70% of people were farmers, at least in the 60s when I was growing up. And we have subsistence farming. So the average acreage is less than 10 acres. So you can imagine most of the farms are like 5-7 acres. And it was all subsistence farming, means everybody was a small farmer. You know, it's a special term in America to be a small farmer. And there it was, and people would just do farming. They would grow corn or grow wheat or rice, and most of the produce for their rest of the year family use. And whatever spare they have, they will sell it. And now, what has happened over the last 40, 50 years, that they're still small farmers, but they have gone into cash crops. So there are some farmers who just grow wheat. That's all they do, or corn, because the weather is such that we get like 4 or 5 crops in a year. But a lot of people have got into cash crops, and that's what these guys are. And I mean, but this is such an important part of Whatcom County economy or our nation's economy. We see big cargills and big farmer corporations and things, but small farmers are really the backbone of the whole agriculture. Look at in our community what change we have seen, that farmers markets, how they're successful. There was only one in Bellingham, now almost Ferndale has it, Linden has it, Kendall has it, and a lot of other places. And people are doing specialty crops, specialty produce or whatever they can do, and go buy their food on Safeway. But they do the other crops. So I think the other thing is this produce and what we have in our nation. They grow tomatoes in Florida and send it to us, or cucumbers, and we grow something and we send it to them. Thousands and thousands of miles on top of the crop. And I think we should start doing that. At least our daily consumption food, we should grow locally. And we can all be successful and eat better, eat fresh. So I welcome this event. It's been a great attraction for our county folks, and for people who are engaged in small farming. And we need to grow it more. We need to make it more successful. And one of the ways is not only for the farmers to grow, but I think the consumers to get connected and start using their products so they can be successful and we can eat better. So this is for everybody. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks to the panel. And I'll get out of their way, and they can give you all the wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. What a great welcome and start to our awesome panel. So each of these fabulous experts, you hear that? No pressure. How to start and nurture a farm business. So each of these individuals has a different part of that nurturing or that starting of a farm business in mind, and they'll be sharing with you. So I'll go through a series of introductory presentations, about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we're just going to open it up for questions. So get those questions formulating in your mind. And we're going to start out, it's going to go in this order, no pressure. The clicker is right here. Katie Pencke is going to start us off with Hogs, Hemp, House, Wine, and Humanity. So we've got Katie Pencke, and then we'll have Coastal Realty, Marie Hegarty with Fair Cows Path Farm, and then Elizabeth Hayes with Cloud Mountain Farm Center. And afterwards, please be ready to engage them in some of your most challenging questions, because they're ready for it. Okay.
Thank you, Annika, for the introduction. Thank you to my fellow panelists. I'm really thrilled to be here today. Full disclosure, I actually used to work with Annika at the old Whatcom Conservation District for many years, and with some of you out in the audience. I see some of my former clients that for many years I was a livestock planner at the Whatcom Conservation District and really enjoyed my work there. It was a chance to get to know a lot about farming from you guys, so thank you for helping me. My partner Matthew and I started looking for land probably 7 years ago, which was about the same time we founded our business, and we came across a really lovely parcel on the Goodwin Road that shows it in 2017, and this map shows it within the context of the fish in the neighborhood, which as a farmer, maybe that's not the first thing you think about. You're thinking about the soil type perhaps, or as a parent you might be thinking about the school district, which all of those things were on our mind, but we also were looking to make a partnership with the Whatcom Land Trust, and so for that reason we were looking at fish. This is going to give you a 30,000-foot view of our business and sort of how we began and where we went, and we'll come back to those photos of the land. So in 2015, we incorporated as a business and made our first offer on a piece of land in the South Fork. And actually that caused the Whatcom Land Trust to call us, and they were like, guys, that should not be a farm, that should be habitat. And we were like, oh, okay, interesting. Well, we also had met one another, my husband and I, by helping other people start small farm businesses. So we knew that land trusts can actually often be partners to help farmers purchase land. So we asked them what type of programs they had, and they mentioned that they do have a bridge loan program for farmers that they've been trying to use. So we started looking for land that had ecological value. In 2016, we raised our first 10 hogs on 3 acres, and we made a second offer. We were on Mac Road, and we were with another couple, and we were still trying to find the right farm. We didn't get that one. Thankfully, springtime got it. It's way too wet for pigs. I'm not sure what I was thinking. And then in 2017, we still had not found land, so we asked our mentor at Circle F Farms, can we raise 50 hogs on 5 acres at your farm? Actually, he offered that. I would never ask anybody that. He offered that. And we took him up on it, and we made yet another offer. At this point, we'd found land on Central Road, and that was a little bit higher, a little bit drier, and we didn't get that one. Luckily, Winding Lane Farm did, and they're growing fruit, and it's a beautiful thing. Oh, the print's really small. So 2018, we finally made it. We closed on a piece of property which was near where we were living, and it was rocky soil, which is really good for livestock, especially pigs, which happens to be our primary enterprise. And the next slide is going to show you, so I'll just fast forward. Here's all the people who helped us buy the farm. So you can see the Whatcom Land Trust, the Conservation District, the Farm Service Agency was our lender. I'm not going to get into the weeds about how all these different people work. I'd be happy to offline if you want to reach out, but just to keep it at 30,000 foot view. And then once we got on the property, these are all the other people who we approached for grant funding. And so this kind of is showing you all the different resources that are out there for farmers. In many ways, if you think of someone starting a knowledge-based business, say the next Facebook or Uber, they come up with a business plan and then they go out and seek financing. And it's just the same for a small farm business, but we go to different sources. And so this kind of shows some of the different groups who are supporting farmers. So back to this. This was raw land when we purchased it, 45 acres. And with the help of the Conservation District, we were able to put together a farm management plan map. And so this is kind of how we ended up mapping. We have along the creek a conservation buffer, a farmstead, and grain field and paddocks. And we sort of evolved it that way through partnership and by setting aside a conservation easement along the creek. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Coastal Realty and welcome questions after the presentation.
Nice job. Are these two?
I don't know.
Are you pointering? We're ill prepared, so. But we do have a slideshow. I'm Allison, Trimble. This is Blake Westhoff, my partner, and we own Coastal Realty in Ferndale, and we do specialize in agricultural properties, hobby farms, acreage stuff. Because we like a challenge. So we're going to talk you through a little bit what the steps or things you consider when you're finding a property that's on acreage here in Whatcom County specifically. And not so much from the purview as being realtors, just from the things you should be considering if you're looking at buying some acreage. Which is here. So some of the things that you're going to look through on a property is well water. And from a contractual standpoint, typically this is something that's handled by the buyer. It's a buyer expense. The seller's asked to provide any of the information, but it is usually a buyer responsibility. The most basic testing you're going to do is going to be for E. coli or coliform. These are very simple tests, like $22. You can find most of the well records on the county health department. There's a really good resource which you'll see later with Septic Systems. It's OSS reports. You can go and access anything that's been reported or tested against the property. In the event that you are wanting to test more thoroughly, there are those options for having well water tested for things like nitrates and all the different arsenic and all the things that go into that. Most wells, when they're attached to a home, go through a process of being tested. You can access those records, but like nitrates and some of the things that can come in after the fact are always good to test, and that's usually a buyer responsibility.
So the septic systems are a little bit different. They're going to be found on most rural properties. You guys probably all have experience with that. And unlike the wells, the septic system is something that's the seller's responsibility typically to be inspected. And so in Washington State, there's a 12-month requirement from the time of sale to get your septic inspected and tested by a licensed professional. And so they're going to do those inspections typically either 12 months before or while you're under contract in your deal. It's a visual examination and then well test, or as well as the testing. And then you can find all the OSS records, as-built sketches on the county website.
That feels like a bad draw. Most of you are very familiar with wetlands, and that's something in Whatcom County that we are usually managing to some degree. If you're buying raw land, that's a big consideration for building or other things. But it's also important to have some good information about that if you're buying farm property, because most of you know you do have the ability often to farm in wetlands. It is something that we have used the Conservation District for pretty heavily and for helping get best practices and that kind of stuff. So when you were going through the process of purchasing a house, it's important to see what wetlands have been recorded on the property, what things might identify as a wetland. Lots of good resources for that. And we have if you're in the process of the sale, and I think this is something that's important to know, the Conservation District will help you with those things in the process of a sale. So it's a really great resource for that. It's depressing to talk about wetlands, so let's talk about something else, like zoning codes. It is important when you're buying property. Oftentimes, farm property are going to be found with ag zoning, which has different regulations on what you can do, and particularly in what you can build. So it's important when you're looking at a property to get information about what's allowable on that property. Usually it's rural residential 5 or 10 acres, something like that, or ag, and it does make a difference what you can do without a conditional use permit or without special permitting. So it's important to look through that, especially if what you're thinking about doing might be outside the zoning codes.
Yeah, and it is important to note, like, conditional use permits and things like that don't transfer. If they're existing on a property and a current owner has a conditional use permit, when you purchase the property, that's something you're going to have to reapply for. And
you transfer.
Or transfer.
Yeah.
And they don't automatically do that.
Yeah, and that is something that a lot of times you'll be looking at a property potentially for an agricultural use, and it has a conditional use permit that's in effect, which is great and very valuable. That does not automatically transfer with the property, so that's something you do have to do a transfer through the county with. That's important. It actually happened in the first horse property that I bought. Blake and I were horse trainers before we were realtors, and so we have a lot of experience on the other side of things, not really from being just realtors, from also practical application. And so the first property that I bought had a conditional use permit on it, and I was not from here and made the assumption that transferred with ownership, and it doesn't. So you do have to go through and do a transfer of conditional use permit, or you lose it, which is not awesome. Oh, you want me to talk about tax? Sure. I'm already up. By show of hands, who's familiar with the different tax classifications that can go over properties? Has everybody seen some of these? Open space, farm and ag? Yeah. So oftentimes if someone is using a rural residential property and they're using it for agricultural purposes, which are allowed within the zoning, they'll apply for a tax classification that gives them a tax break. So the most common open space programs, and this is very confusing terminology, within the open space, there is open space, also not clear, which you're giving people, open space gives people the ability to use property kind of as a park. You're giving people access to it, and you get a tax deduction for that, a property tax deduction. The other is farm and ag. It's most common of what we would see, and that's that you have agricultural processes happening on the property that allow you to get this discount. When you sell the property, you'll have to prove that. So there's kind of a graduated scale of what you need to bring in on the property every year in gross sales, which is really easy to accomplish, and a lot of times does give you a really great tax break, and that's amazing. But if you're going to sell a property, you will have to prove that to the assessor's office. And then if you're buying the property, you want to know that they have had that, met those standards for the 5 years previous. Is usually what, 3 out of 5 years you'll have to met a certain amount of gross income off the property. So it's just important to know if there's that overlay over a property that you're buying, because there can be some complicated things that happen with that. We'd be happy to talk about it any other time. That's all we got for now. Take questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, sorry. You don't get in charge. Hi, I'm Marie. I am a co-owner of Fair Cows Path Farm. We're located just south of Blaine. I farm with my husband Steve, and we try to do a good job. I'm talking about farming challenges and success in Western Washington. Real heavy on the challenges, light on the success, but I'm gonna try. So 142 acres, we're in the Drayton Harbor watershed, and we are right on the banks of California Creek, and I mean right on the banks of California Creek. That is our barn. and our whole property just drains right in there. So, big challenge. We raise grass-fed beef, pastured pork, and La Mancha dairy goats, which we just use for hobby use. So challenge number 1, pretty much anywhere you farm in Whatcom County, is mud and poop and having terrible grass growth because of the mud and the poop. So this is what our place looked like before we had the Conservation District come out and help us. This was a big mess. So some successful things that you can do with your property is install best management practices. So heavy use areas, taking your animals off of pasture during the winter time. We do this by renting a facility. It's an old dairy barn, and it houses most of our beef herd. It's about 50 head of cattle that are housed there. And then we also installed a heavy use area on our home farm, which is where my milk cows and any of our special needs cattle spend the winter time. So anybody who's really old, anybody who's calving out of season, they all stay at home. And it's a lot of work, but definitely makes our pastures a lot better during the growing season. Lots of poop cleanup. Wow, that was a really heavy emphasis on poop. Some more pictures. The top picture is the manure, it's a dry stack that gets covered in the wintertime. It gets all full of the manure pickup and cleaning that we've done through wintertime. This shows some of our resting stalls, and the picture on the left is my milk cows and where they eat during wintertime. That's a concreted area, super easy to pick up poop. Challenge number 2, all the wetlands and waterways that we have around here, super fun. So this was what our property looked like, a couple years ago when we had some heavy rains. I did not put the picture of the November flooding because you wouldn't have been able to see any of the grass. The whole thing was just water. So these are swales that fill with water, and they are right behind our barn and where all of our animals live during winter time. So we've had to kind of build up the area where our animals are and kind of make it so it all drains into one area, and then have these big grass filter strips where water runs through and gets clean before it hits California Creek. So one of the ways to be successful is to install these buffers and filter strips and make the riparian areas. Conservation District's super helpful with this. CREP program, if any of you have heard of that, also really great. These are pictures of about 12 acres that we have enrolled in CREP. It's pretty great. They help pay for the fencing. The folks come out and help manage it and keep the weeds down and everything for the first couple of years. And it keeps our cattle out of places they're not supposed to be. And also, it's kind of pretty, like the red currants that are blooming right now. I really like those. Some more pictures. Very nice. So challenge number 3 that you might find as a livestock farmer in Whatcom County is good large animal vets, good meat processors, and good feed companies. So this is a picture of our custom exempt processor. This is Linden Meat. Way to be really successful with this is to establish good rapport with these people. So making sure you're an established client, making sure that you're using them for things that aren't just emergencies, like with your vets, making sure that you pay your bills on time. Feed company doesn't like if you have these big giant feed bills that you're not paying, so if you're good to them, they'll be real good to you. We use Colshin for our vets. Guy in the blue is Dr. Murphy. He's my favorite vet. He does real great with the cows. We use Ellen Boss Feed Company to produce the feed for our dairy goats and my dairy cows. Really great people. Challenge number 4, staying authentic. This is a small area. It is difficult to do things individually without copying people, without stepping on people's toes. And it's really important that you do you. You pay attention to what you're doing, you pay attention to how you're doing it, and you focus on your goals. You're going to be the most successful if you're not paying attention to how everybody else is doing everything. Social media, good to have a presence on there, not super great to be paying attention to what everyone else is doing. They don't have the same goals as you. They don't have the same customer base as you necessarily. It's just really important to do your own thing. You know, make the funny faces, hang out with your llama, pet your bull, whatever it is that makes you authentic and makes you do what makes you special, do those things. Don't copy people. Don't not thank people that have really helped you along the way. It's part of what makes Whatcom County great. There are so many people here that do such a good job and are so willing to help you. And all you need to do is just give them a little bit of thanks, maybe a shout out on your social media, whatever you need to do. It really helps, and that makes all of us just be better farmers, you know, lending a hand when we can. So, there you go.
All right, I'm the shortest, so I hope this still works. Y'all hear me? I'm Elizabeth. I'm the director at Cloud Mountain Farm Center in Everson. We're on Goodwin Road. We've been a Whatcom County orchard and farm for over 40 years. Going into our 11th year as a nonprofit research and education farm. So I'm on a different management path than some of these other folks in that I inherited someone's legacy. Tom and Cheryl Thornton started this property about 30, 40 years ago. And so that means, probably like some of you, you're on a property where someone else has made the infrastructure decisions and has made the planting decisions. Some of those you learn a lot from, and some of them you learn how you maybe improve things if you were able to do them from the ground up. And I'm going to talk specifically about planning farm business for resilience and longevity. Diversity in production and planning. I should also say, by the way, all these photos are from Maya Binhammer, who's our post-harvest sales and marketing expert. So we've always prided ourselves at Cloud Mountain for growing hundreds of varieties. That pertains to orchard varieties, pome fruit, stone fruit, small fruit, just about everything that can grow in Western Washington. That doesn't always mean everything that can grow well. And we started with, like a lot of farms, with a shotgun approach. Absolutely everything out there and see what works over time. You can start with an inch deep and a mile wide, but over time will force adaptation and selection pressure for you. If we started with over 200, 300 varieties on farm, we're still incredibly genetically diverse, but we're probably at about 100 varieties. And we do those varieties really well. We know more about them, we're spread a lot less thin, and we focus on those things that do well for us so that we can encourage other growers to focus on those varieties. I think also my background prior to this was in grain production, specialty grain production. I started out at a mill. We were raising our own hard red spring wheat in Western Oregon organically. It's a terrible idea. You can contract for that on the east side. And we started out growing every single specialty grain known to man. Within 3 to 5 years of our business growth, we contracted all our hard red spring wheat from the east side, and we focused on those regional varieties that are so unique to our area that really made us stand out that we could do better with. We did less and we did it better. I have taken that lesson from watching all of my bosses over the last 10 years into what we're doing at Cloud Mountain. Thinking about particularly, we work in orchard systems, so we are forced to think on 5, 10, 15-year timelines because it's about that long before you start to see any produce come off of your plantings, be that orchard or vineyard. And when you're thinking about farm business development, a lot of times in business planning, you think about what does success look like in 5 years, 10, 15, 25, maybe in terms of financial goals, but also when we talk about planting trees with folks in the nursery, be that commercial growers or home growers, what does success look like in 10 or 15 years? Are you harvesting on a 10-foot orchard ladder? Are you 60 when you're putting these trees in? Do you like mowing? Are you going to be mowing your orchard? What is it going to look like when you have 2 kids, when you have grandkids? What is your workflow? What is your work-life balance? And what are you going to plant to make that possible for yourself? Start with your values and start with the other pieces of your life, and then have your farm work around that. Otherwise, you're in for a really uphill battle. And additionally, what do cash flow and community look like? I work substantially with new farmers through our farm incubator program, and the reasons that people come to farming are as varied as the people themselves. Some people come in specifically to address food security. Some people come in because they want to integrate into a rural community. Very rarely do people get into farming because it's what they're good at. It's a unique industry in that way. It's a unique nexus of sort of your mission and your passion and all of these other things. And people don't often get into it because it's what they're specifically good at. But think about both what cash flow and community look like. Who else in your community are you going to be able to rely on for that veterinary care, for those relationships, for feed? What rapport are you building? We have folks, I think specifically of our nursery manager and her husband who farm in the South Fork Valley, and they live and thrive on a sort of barter economy off of their farm because they've made lots of partnerships and friendships and skills that are complementary to one another. So think about what success looks like. Who do you need to meet? What skills do you need to develop to be really valuable? What do you add to your community from your farm? Fixed assets and finding inspiration. You're going to want to evaluate every single asset on your farm, especially if you come into someone else's property and you're dealing with barns and equipment, implements, tractors. Inventory all of that. Get a really strong financial background. There's financial resources out there to help you with an asset sheet and depreciate. Plan for things failing. Plan for things aging. Get your finances and your cash flow structured so that you are able to replace things as they age, or you're able to invest in doing things right the first time if you've inherited a structure or a system that just doesn't work for you. And then the payoff of doing some things right the first time. What do you rely on to make your season functional? Is it fencing? Is it irrigation? If that system doesn't work for you, it is worth the upfront investment to do that in a way that works for you. We have resources in terms of conservation district for full farm planning if you're looking at space use on your farm. And there's folks that will help you in terms of irrigation systems as well. And then I think two of the most important things, who can you learn from and what does your land tell you? I know that the impetus when especially you get access to land is to start this year or start yesterday. Put things in the ground, come to Cloud Mountain, buy 50 trees, put them in, spend a season, see where water sits, see where your frost pockets are. Spend some time knowing what the land actually wants to do with you. I'm going to skip over these things, but you can come talk to me at the booth if you really want to, about marketing and employment and the parts of farming that are way harder than farming and production itself. These are the two things that I troubleshoot with new farmers more than anything, is how to get the thing that you grow well to market and how to retain and hire people that will help you do that. And then lastly, how can Cloud Mountain help you? We have a WSDA certified processing room. That's fresh produce or cold pack value added. If you want R&D space for a certified processing room to improve your kimchi or your kraut production or bagged salad greens, we have a processing room that's affordable and rentable, walk-in cooler space by the pallet, covered dry storage, food hub aggregation space, low-cost land lease and shared equipment through our incubator farm, and field days, farm tours, open accessible staff who've been in the county for a long time. You can come talk to me at my booth. Please come visit us on Goodwood Road and join us for our first farm tour of the season next Saturday. Woo.
Awesome. Okay, well, we get to now move into the panel discussion part. This is where you stand up and you kind of shuffle your chairs. Perfect. Is it going to be space? Oh yeah, I'll do that in a second. Testing, testing. Okay, so thank you all, first of all, thank you all so much. I have so many questions, and I'm sure that the audience does as well. So I'm going to start with the audience, and then we can go into my questions. But you've got this breadth of knowledge here and experience in a lot of different capacities of farming in Whatcom County. Who has a question that they'd like to ask our panel? And you can do it for a specific person or for the whole group. Great.
When you're starting out, how did you start to learn about the regulatory environment and also how to cover yourself from some liability? It seems so daunting to understand all different touch points and different three-letter agencies. What's a processing room? When can you legally sell something? Did you find any single place that captured all of those considerations at the federal level?
I actually have an answer to that. I would say there's a really great entry-level farm business planning program that's run by Washington State University. They call it Cultivating Success, and they run it every year. I think they, in the pandemic, like everything else, switched to more virtual. And so that is a really great kind of entry-level, starting to learn all the vocabulary like you're talking about. I would recommend Cultivating Success by WSU. I would also recommend incubator programs. I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but there's one located at Cloud Mountain Farm Center. Might be good to go through a Cultivating Success first to just get basic vocabulary, but then an incubator program is a place where there's staff who can kind of mentor you along those lines, as well as infrastructure. But if you have your own site in mind and can't access an incubator site, then Cultivating Success is a great resource.
But honestly, the Washington State Department of Agriculture, their website has a lot of information, and you can actually use a search bar, and if you type in your question, a lot of information will pop up. And then there are phone numbers on there that you can call a lot. There's a guy named Pietro that I talk to a lot. He knows me, and I say, hey, it's Marie, from Fairhouse Scotland. He's like, okay. And they're really good at answering your questions about what permits, licenses, things like that you need. And generally speaking, those permits and licenses also have other permits and licenses that it's just like hoop after hoop after hoop, and then eventually you're done. But WSDA is a good place to look.
Yeah, WSDA, it's top by their table if you're interested in direct marketing or starting at least, doing farmers markets, on-farm sales, etc. They have their handbook on direct marketing, rules, regulations, etc. The green book, it's really helpful.
And I could also to add to more of the land regulatory pieces, the conservation district is a non-regulatory third party that is able to translate a lot of those requirements, a lot of the regulatory paradigm that can help you ensure that your property and how you're building your property will comply with it. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know who wants to answer this, but it's for all of you. We planted black walnut trees, and they're starting to produce, and we really need to know how to sell them, like a huge amount, 100 pounds of black walnuts.
That's a really interesting one. I guess it's probably, for those of you who haven't yet planted your trees, it's good to have a market before you launch an enterprise. But there is a resource that's called the Puget Sound Food Hub that is a resource for local wholesaling. And their mission is to support farmers, and they deal with larger volumes. They're located in Skagit. They're a farmer-owned cooperative, and so one potential would be to approach the Puget Sound Food Hub. There are your business has to be at a certain level to sell through them as far as licensing, and you need to have farm liability insurance, product liability insurance. But otherwise, maybe a smaller barrier to entry might be a farmer's market type of thing.
Are you selling them whole in shells, or do you have a capacity to shell yourself?
We don't have the capacity to shell ourselves. We just have a hand nutcracker.
Sure. Yeah.
And of course, we didn't realize that black walnuts, I guess a lot of farmers already realize this, we didn't. They produce more and more as the years go by. And now that they've been there for 20 years, they're starting to produce a lot.
Yeah, I think to Katie's point, it's always nice to have your market ahead of time, so you're not in a position of who wants to buy 250 pounds of black walnuts. Marie does. But you do, yeah, there are sort of home scale groups, Whatcom Farmers Trading Posts, others, Facebook, that you can move small volumes, small quantities, and oftentimes, particularly for direct market opportunities, come out of there. Be that vending through a farmer's market, even on smaller capacities. Yeah.
We've been selling quinces, for instance, to Whatcom Farmers Expo, organic quince that are
Sure, yeah.
they've been very cool.
Yeah. Start small, see where else black walnuts can end up.
Thank you.
Great, yeah, great question. Anybody need any black walnuts? I think that was the segue, right? Any other questions that folks have? What's your burning question?
Hey, Marie, I think you were talking about not grazing your animals in pasture in the winter. And indoor farm, I've got 6 acres. It's only been running for a year. I've already grazed them, in one of the pastures in the winter. And I'm just, how many animals I have, so I got another horse now. But could you talk a little bit more about that? If I already messed up, one of my pastures, if I have 5 or 6 small pastures and I let them out, from time to time to different areas in the winter, is that really going to mess up my pastures?
No, not necessarily. So we have to pull our animals off because we have so much, as the water drains away, and because we're right there on the creek, it doesn't really have that much, filter potential before it reaches the creek. Also, we have super heavy clay soil, and with the amount of cattle that we have, that heaviness really compacts it. So it kind of depends on the type of soil you have there. There are definitely ways of like strip grazing, where you using a really small area and move them around really fast, and that keeps that soil from getting too compacted. But no, you haven't ruined your pastures. It totally depends on your soil type and how you care for it the rest of the year. I would suggest if you have the ability or the space to put in a heavy use area with proper footing for the type of animals that you have, that is really more ideal for them. You think that the animals would really rather be out on the pasture, being able to move around. Our heavy use areas are big, so our animals have plenty of room to move around. They have a big wood chip pile that we keep clean, and they stay out of anything wet that might be in the area that they stay in. So you'd probably be better off for your pasture potential to be pulling them off. But that doesn't mean that you can't necessarily manage it well during the winter so that it isn't impacting you greatly. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, you do it.
I guess I would also add that with any soil type in our climate, that if you do have animals out there, the compaction that's going to result from that is going to possibly require you to do some extra farming in the growing season.
Yes.
And so it could be anything from running an aerator across the pasture just to relieve the compaction and keep those plants there, but it might also be all the way to disking it, working it up type of thing, and replanting it, and then babying those young plants, because sometimes, especially if it's impacted by animals in the winter when those plants are not growing, they have a hard time bouncing back. Grass plants and forage plants tend to be a little more sensitive, so there's some farming that can be done behind it. And I guess I would also offer that Alluvial Farms, we are hosting farm tours as well this year. We should coordinate them so we were on the same weekends. But we're third Saturday of every month, and we are running pigs, which is kind of unusual, but we're having them out in paddocks roughly February through November. We have really rocky, well-drained soil, but we leave them in there till about 75% of the vegetation is destroyed and then farm behind them. And so that might be a way to come and check out a system where we're renewing the paddock behind the animal each time.
I don't know if we're about to relocate, but also in terms of pasture renovation, we just bought a key line plow this year for our in-orchard alley work. So that's a minimal topsoil disturbance but subsoil ripper. If you're interested in seeing that, it was custom welded by our neighbor, and we are very open to lending that out to folks for use. So get a hold of us or swing by the farm sometime.
I can real quick, yeah. So Yeah, and I've gone through that. Now, on your property, it's very different in the amount of time that you would be turning horses out. With regards to, cattle don't tend to tear up the same way they tend to compact soil. Horses, if you have them out during that time of the year, tear it up. Get really deep, they run it up, they pick stuff up, so that's where they're kind of destroying it. And then the kind of animals that you graze are very differently. Horses graze very differently and selectively compared to cattle, compared to sheep, compared to donkeys and goats and things. You have a pretty good variety. I think the thing you just have to be careful about is when you turn out how much damage they do. They're almost better to be out more often, where they walk and go places. In the winter though, it's less compaction and more destruction. So it gets down, kills the root bases, that kind of stuff. So most of the areas that we're talking about having more sacrifice areas and things like that, which is something we look very heavily at when we're looking at properties, you know, for clients, and that's one of the reasons that it's important to work with somebody who's used to looking at that kind of stuff. We do have such different soil types, and looking at properties that already have established, you know, how much money do you guys think you spend trying to get those places ready, right? Like how much money is spent creating sacrifice areas and best use practices and all of that. So when we're looking at agricultural properties or horse properties or anything that you put animals on, that infrastructure and the planning and that goes into it is invaluable. And so people who come to things like this, work with the conservation district, are thoughtful about things like Alan's talking about. That's very important when you're looking at something to buy, because you either are trying to fix a problem someone else created, which is like wicked expensive, or you're trying to create it from scratch, which is even more expensive, well, maybe not more expensive, or you get to build on something that somebody has had some thought and experience in. So, no, you're not running your passion.
You guys are all so great. This is such a great panel. Any other? I thought I said hand up. Oh, you got it. He said follow-up. Anyone else? Before we do a follow-up?
So, you know, we were talking about where you were talking about manure and stuff like that, and you know what kind of animals? I have 2 horses, I got 2 donkeys, and 2 big goats. And you know, we've been around a year, and it seems like there's more manure than I was expecting, and probably because I give them a lot of busy hay, you know, and so that they can munch all day or whatever, and that just makes more manure. And I'm just wondering what are some of the options, like manure spreading on your property or things like that, if you could just talk about it.
So all of the manure that our animals produce gets spread on our hay fields. So our solid manure is mainly what we spread. We spread that in the fall. And then in between hay cuttings, we have liquid manure applied that we actually haul in from our friend's dairy. So yes, it isn't the amount of hay that you're feeding that's causing the amount of manure. They just make a lot. So have you ever had the conservation district out to your property if you had a farm plan come out? Highly recommend that. They can help you come up with a manure management plan. There's also funding available that you could have a manure storage built with those go blocks. You know, So there's funding available for that. And it's a great thing to put in, especially for horse manure because it stacks so well. And then the conservation district also rents a little manure spreader that you could rent in spring or fall or whenever you want to apply your manure. And you just pull it behind and it flicks out the stuff and it's great. Oh yeah, it's here. You can have a look at it. But it's for rent and I don't think it costs a terrible amount of money. Yeah, so that's a really good resource to use specifically for your place, for sure.
Anybody else? And actually the talk after this panel is on some of the resources that the Conservation District offers. So we'll cover a lot of those pieces. Other questions? I have one. Hey, if you can think back, 5, 10 years ago, not looking in the future, but looking back, what were the thing that you wish you could tell yourself 5, 10 years ago when you started all of this? And what do you just wish that you would have known, or what resources did you wish that you would have known prior to starting out in the industry that you're in?
If I could go back 5 years, probably what I would tell myself is it's going to take more capital than I thought it was going to take. After the first 3 years of developing raw land, I was like, whoa, we're not even barely halfway there. And I'm already, have a fair amount of debt, and we haven't even built a house yet. So it's a big project, developing raw land, I guess is what I would say. And I just want to thank all the clients out there who've been so supportive over the years, because that keeps us going. And people are like, this food is amazing, thank you so much for growing food for my family. So that's a big help.
If I could go back 5 years, I'd say, don't worry about it, all the pieces will fall into place. I used to work in commodity ag, so I was an agronomist for seed producers, orchards, vineyards as well, but primarily working in large seed-grown areas in the Willamette Valley. And to move into smaller scale organic orchard production, sometimes you think like, well, how do all these things add up together? But I think having a foot in the commodity world and having worked in large scale ag is a huge benefit for working in small to mid scale production, because it helps you understand how large operations work, how large markets work, and if you want small organic farms to have some of that same impact, what choices do you have to make? So I tell myself that I actually do have the skills that it takes.
I would probably tell myself that it's gonna be okay. You're gonna figure it out. And even if you don't know how to do it right now, you're gonna learn how to do it. And there are so many people out there willing to help you and figure out the answers. So when you are at that place where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how to do this, where do I find the answers for this? There's usually somebody out there, and probably just around the corner from you, who knows how to do the thing and is super happy to lend a hand and teach you, because they want agriculture to continue in our county. They want the next generation of people to be doing this. A lot of the farming community is aging out of being able to farm, and these young people who are excited and interested and want to learn, and those people are so happy to help. So yeah, it's gonna work out. You're gonna know how to do things, and you're gonna learn. It'll be okay.
I will kind of echo the same thing. So 20-something years ago, when I graduated from college and was quite idealistic about, and moved here from out of the area, it takes way more money than you think, especially when you're on the wrong property, and then you're there. So it is one of the things that then, 15 plus years later, when I got back into family business and real estate, I was very passionate about and didn't get the opportunity to build from the ground up a property kind of close, and had lots of experiential, I can tell you what not to do, like nobody's business, and how expensive that is, even when things weren't as expensive as they are now. So it will be okay eventually. It is very expensive if you don't have some resources, and there are so many people who have great resources and are willing to help you. All of these people here are people that we do stuff with and have helped us get our farm plan. Lots of, just like literally our friends, there's lots of people to be involved to help you. The thing I would have done differently back then is had more knowledge about this specific area and the property we were buying, and the conditional use permit that didn't transfer, and all of the intricacies that went along with, we were experienced in real estate. It's not like I'm a third generation realtor. My family is in real estate in Alaska. But being here and having specific knowledge about things like soil types and all of the things that go into farming, this is a really great farming area for some reasons, and it's a very challenging and very hard place to farm for other reasons. And managing that, the most expensive thing you are going to do is buy a property and build on it. And then the next most expensive thing you're going to do is making up for the shortcomings in your property or things that you did wrong. So I guess that's what I would have done differently. It's one of the reasons we're very passionate about keeping ag going in Whatcom County and helping people make that happen. So. Great.
Literally, I was going to say the same thing. As Allison just did, what not to do is, as important as what you do. You just learn so many. We see all of these properties. We see so many of them a day, and the amount of planning that people can do at a time and utilizing the resources saves you so much money in the long run. And the hard part right now is people are, buying properties that are set up poorly, and you're paying for that. But you're also, that's what you can afford, but you're also paying for them to not have a good setup. So they have fencing, they have a sacrifice area or something, but it's not set up well, it doesn't drain properly, it goes into the wrong areas, it floods the field, and then you have to pay to fix it again, so you pay twice, essentially. And so it just is, it's complex in this area, it's tough to do stuff in. It's a great area to live in and do business and live, but it's tough conditions. So it's just really important to know what you're dealing with. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We're at the end of our time for this amazing panel. Can we just give them a round of applause? Thank you all. And we're stick around just for a quick photo afterwards. And